you might have to be open to the fact that God is still good and He will bring about good, but it may look very different than what you anticipated.
Welcome, friends. Stasi here, and I'm so glad that you're joining me today on Captivated. I am really excited about the time we're going to share today because I have two guests with me, and you're going to see we're going to be talking about this. But first, let me just welcome a woman who doesn't need any introduction, Lysa TerKeurst. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining
Oh,
me.
thank you, Stacey. It's such an honor to be with you.
Oh, thanks. And with her is biblical scholar and co-host of the podcast, which is called, I wrote it down and I listened to it, Therapy and Theology, Dr. Joel Muddamalle. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Stacey. So honored to be here with you.
We're here to talk about Lysa's new book, which is written alongside Joel as well as Jim Kress, Surviving an Unwanted Divorce, a biblical, practical guide to letting go while holding yourself together. Lysa writes that it's the book she never wanted to write, but it's such a necessary book. And may I say, needed, healing, wise, beautiful, and holy. This is a holy work. I couldn't go very far in the pages without tears coming to my eyes. So this is such an important work. Let me just read the back copy. Divorce isn't just a decision a person makes one day. It's a vortex of indescribable pain, shame, and devastation, wrapped in a tangle of questions that may never be answered, and a heap of judgment from those who truly don't understand. Rather than Googling late at night trying to figure out what to do, I hope you can find what you need in these pages. Yes, Lysa writes, so much about your life has changed, but you also get to choose how you will change. Remember, God is not in the business of leaving us in a place of ruin. Now, I can't promise you'll get all the answers you want about what happened, but I can help you find the emotional fortitude and biblical confidence you need to move on in healthier ways from here. You've lived through a nightmare, and now it's time to give yourself permission to dream again. Thank you. I think one of the words I would use to describe this book is tender. It's thick with kindness, with compassion, real compassion, and yes, wisdom. So I'd love to hear, actually from both of you, what led to you writing it now? Was there something that happened that you went, no, this is really needed now?
Well, I'll jump in and then certainly I want to hear from Joel on this one as well. For me, I was not eager to revisit all of the hurt and all of the pain. And so I didn't write this book because I'm so eager to talk about divorce. I wrote this book because I felt so compelled to help people who right now are where I was at several years ago when I felt like I'd been in the equivalent of an emotional car accident and something was severed from me. So basically, like if you were in a physical car accident today and your arm got severed,
Yes.
you would know exactly what to do. People would call 911. They would get the paramedics there. They would put a tourniquet on my arm. They'd rush me to the hospital. They'd put me in surgery. Qualified doctors would come immediately tend to me, tend to my pain. And also people would not expect me to show up to work tomorrow, right? And so
Right, yes.
people know exactly what to do if you are in a physical trauma. But you know, when I walked through the shock and awe of discovering that my then husband was living a double life, and then as the years unfolded, and it was many years where I was so determined to fight for this marriage, I did not want to go through a divorce. But as the years turned, you know, just more and more in the direction of the death of my marriage, I felt like I needed to be taken to an emergency room basically for my emotional trauma, but there was no emergency room and people didn't necessarily know what to do. Plus there was a lot of confusion biblically around, you know, I mean, the one verse that most Christians tend to know about divorce is God hates divorce. And so I was just left in a place of desperation. And so now, as I look back on where I was and what I needed, this is the book I wish I would have had.
That is so good. That is so good. And I so appreciate that you've rephrased even the word divorce to the death of a marriage, because it is a death, and it's a death of the life that you had. And you're stepping into a life you never planned on or maybe even ever wanted to have.
Right.
So there's so much wisdom and mercy in that. And then to say, as living in the context of most of my friends are Christians, and of course, I have many friends who have been through an unwanted divorce, but then they lived with so much shame over it. So I'm wondering from our biblical scholar if you could unpack any of that, because you write about kind of a different perspective that really is in the gospels and in the Old Testament about divorce.
Yeah, I think Stacy, to for me, part of the necessity of writing this book really comes from that question, and for me, it was honestly walking alongside of Lysa. Have been at Proverbs for for just at 10 years now. I've known Lysa for over a decade, and it was just a year and a half into me being full time at Proverbs that her life took a really unexpected twist and turn. And Lisa and I are like real friends. We do life together. My kids call her Auntie Lisa. When things
Oh,
go wild in my house, questions, concerns with my kids, my wife and I pick up the phone, or we're at Lisa's house and we're asking her questions. And so we've done life together. And there is this sense that I got just in ministry, as we've walked alongside talking about these really hard, difficult theological topics, is that after all of my education, undergraduate degree in biblical studies, seminary, THM, did a stint with an organizational psychology master's degree, and then a PhD in biblical theology. We just never really talked about in all that education the real practicalities of what the Bible actually says about divorce.
hmm.
And along with that is this real big question of shame and guilt that
Yes.
comes with it.
Yes.
For me, I think one of the things that we found is that there are certain Christian phrases and there's certain Christian sayings that have kind of taken on a meaning of its own. And we just kind of
Hmm.
presume, well, of course, that's in the Bible. And so one of them is Malachi 2. It comes from Malachi 2:16. And it's this phrase, well, God hates divorce. And if you were to look at your Bible now, like most modern Bible translations, that's not even the way that it's written in the mainline text.
Wow.
And so then the question is like, well, where did this come from? And it actually came from the King James Version, actually, technically, the updated NKJV, the New King James Version, where the translation committee takes an interpretive decision and interprets the Hebrew phrase that underlies the English language, and says God hates divorce. But here's the thing, Stacey, if you were to take that exact passage in the original Hebrew and you went to a Hebrew
Hmm.
scholar and you said, hey, would you mind translating this for me? They would look at that text and they go, oof, hold up. I got to think about this for a second, because it's complicated. It's not just an easy,
Ah.
simple way to translate it. And there's really good news. We have ancient sources that help us in the translation method. And so the Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek, and that's called the Septuagint. And the Septuagint actually clarifies the areas of ambiguity of the Hebrew Bible. And what we actually find is that God is not, I mean, the text just simply does not say God hates divorce. What it says is that he, referring to the husband, who hates and divorces his wife,
Oh.
this is the person who does a treacherous act. This is the person who causes violence, who covers themselves in garments of injustice. And so what's actually happening here is that God is displeased, absolutely, but his displeasure and his anger and his frustration, his sorrow, his grief is not
Hmm.
aimed at the victim, the one who is left holding a shattered marriage that she never intended. His displeasure, his anger, his frustration is actually aimed at the one who broke covenant, the one who's acting in unrighteous ways. And so that clarity actually changes so much for so many women. At Proverbs 31 Ministries, We constantly get messages. Lisa and I, when we're out speaking at events, we're hearing real life stories of women who have heard that
Yes.
phrase, God hates divorce. And that
Yes.
was a source of secret shame, silent shame, that they just felt like,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't what they wanted. They didn't participate in any unrighteousness or sinful activity. And yet that marriage was ripped apart. And now you're just
Mm-hmm.
left feeling like, well, God hates me. And that's just not the case.
Right. Right. Okay. There's so much mercy in the truth that you just spoke of. This is where the tears come because it's the fullness of the gospel. And that is the heart of God. He's kind. And for my friends that have been through this, and you write about this, so often a woman will feel um, not just that her marriage failed, that she's a failure, but that she is somehow now outside of the grace and love of God. And then to reclaim, come back into this relationship with God takes a big healing work, and it takes this kind of insight into what God is really like, how he looks at it. Lisa, what would you say? And you would say this. So I know I don't usually do this with books. However, this book isn't just for a woman who's going through an unwanted divorce or who has, or if you know someone who has or is. I really think it's for everyone. I think it's important. It's important, and not just even on the topic, but the other things that you go into translate into aspects of life that are vital. So everybody run, get it. But so to the woman who feels disqualified spiritually, Lisa, is that something that you felt when you were going through this?
Well, my journey was so long. I would say at the beginning when people were very shocked because I had held private what I was going through for over 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I
Mm.
finally announced in 2017 that it looked like my marriage was going to move in the direction of divorce, um, I think people were so shocked that they didn't understand that I think they did really question me. And I wouldn't say I felt spiritually disqualified, but I did question whether or not I should stay in ministry. And one thing that someone said to me, and this was probably one of the most hurtful, but yet also I just had to stop and had to ponder it and had to consider it. Um, Things that people said is, Lisa, if you get a divorce, you're going to lead thousands, potentially, even a million women to think that now it's okay to get a divorce. And man, that stopped me dead in my tracks. And I just thought, please don't put that on me. I don't think I'm that powerful,
Yes.
you
Mm,
know?
Mm,
Like,
mm-mm.
my focus right now has to be on what is reality in my situation. And I'm not the only one choosing whether or not my marriage stays together. Because if it were my choice,
Right.
I would do everything possible to fight for this marriage. But my good
Mm-hmm.
friend Leslie Bernick taught me something so powerful. She said, Lisa, there's a big difference between a difficult marriage, which you should fight for, where two people have the ability to come together and seek each other's highest good. And yes, there's going to be difficulties, but you fight through those difficulties. You go get counseling, read the books and go to the conferences and do all of the stuff. But there's a big difference between a difficult marriage and a destructive marriage. A destructive marriage is a
Mm-hmm.
completely different entity, and we need to treat it as such. So,
Mm-hmm.
my prayer then became, Lord, take me out of ministry if I'm going to do anything to dishonor your name. I don't want to lead anyone astray, but that was not God's plan. I look back now
Mm-hmm.
and I see it's more like the Genesis 50-20 principle. You intended to harm me. This is what Joseph said to the
Yes.
brothers who betrayed him.
Mm-hmm.
You intended to
Mm-hmm.
harm me, but God, here comes the redemption, but God
Yes.
intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. And I don't dare say that I'm on the same level as Joseph, but I do see hints of his story in my story. And that is, this is not a story I ever wanted to live. It's not a story that I ever wanted to write about. But if God can now take it and use it for good, and I've seen that He can,
Yes.
then,
Yes.
praise the Lord. And no, I do not think that I'm disqualified.
Pause, breathe that in. Every listener who has lived under that accusation. Oh, no, you're not. And I know too many women who stay in destructive marriages because they think that's what they're supposed to do. Like it doesn't matter anything at all how much abuse they're taking, whether that's verbal or physical or all kinds of reasons why they shouldn't actually stay in the marriage, but they do. Um, do you think that's based on just false teaching, or is that just something we bear as
Yeah.
women?
I think there's layers to that, and I always want to say, Jim and Joel and I, we never want to tell someone what to think. We just want to give them a lot to think
Mm.
about. I want to give them
Oh, that's so good.
the emotional fortitude and the biblical confidence to think through this because you have to consider the cost on both sides. There is a
Mm,
cost if you go, and there's a cost if you
mhm,
stay. Most of us
mhm.
maximize the cost if we go while minimizing the cost if we stay. And all I'm saying is we need to
Yes.
bring those back into equilibrium and consider the impact on both sides of the equation. And look, I always want women to know you have agency. You get to choose. You really do get to choose. But please consider the cost if you stay in a relationship where there is a destructive pattern to it, where there is abuse, abandonment, addictions, affairs. There is a physical reality to the emotional trauma that you are experiencing
Yes.
over and over and over. And most people don't get to see physical evidence of emotional trauma, but I did. So part of
Mm,
my journey is that the emotional trauma took quite a toll on me. And my colon
mm.
twisted and cut off the blood flow
Oh,
inside of me. And I had to have massive surgery to remove most of my colon. And I've
oh
never
my goodness.
yeah, and I've never heard of a surgeon doing this, but my surgeon was so disturbed by what he saw, he
Mm.
actually took pictures so that he could show
Wow.
me what this emotional trauma was costing me physically. And obviously, I don't freely share those pictures, but I did take them to my therapist, Jim Kress, who is also a contributor to this book. And I think for both of us, it made us realize we're never ever gonna hesitate to use the words emotional abuse, because I think before it feels so slippery, like, okay, well,
Yes.
where is that line that this actually qualifies as abuse? Look, if you are the one that is enduring the dynamics of a dysfunctional, destructive marriage, and you keep asking the question, is it me? Am I crazy? Like, did I really
Mhm.
see what I saw? Did I really hear what I heard? Did I really experience what I experienced? And if you start asking that question, massive red flag that there possibly are destructive patterns and emotional abuse in that relationship. And I just want people to open up their eyes and have a full consideration and be honest about what they're really experiencing. I could not do that at first, Stacy, because I felt like it would be so
Mhm.
disrespectful and dishonoring of my then husband. But as Joel and I studied theologically, me out of a desperation to not do anything that would dishonor God, Joel helped me see, Lysa, you honor what is honorable. You do not honor what is dishonorable to not only you, but also to God.
Mm.
Thank you. Powerful. In the midst of the wrestling, in the midst of asking, am I seeing this? Did they just say that? Is that going on? And that can translate to lots of situations where we say or pray for really good things. God, I want you to redeem this. I need you to change this, change their heart, do this marvelous thing that would be really good. And in the mystery, things don't change sometimes. I love that you bring that up because that is an across the board situation where we actually don't have a transactional God. But could both of you share anything on that? Like for the people that are praying for something that's out of their control and it doesn't seem to be happening.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
jump in and then I want to
yeah,
hear from you as well, Joel. I think sometimes some of us, myself included, I thought that the only redemption story was it had to be a reconciliation. I just couldn't see any redemption beyond a reconciliation. And so I fought for a long time. The last 10 years of my almost 30-year marriage, out of the last 10 of those years, I was separated off and on for 5 of those years. So when
Mm.
you look at the reality of that, I was fighting, I was giving second chances, third chances. I was just holding on for dear life and begging God, please God, don't you see how this would be this could give such hope to all these hurting marriages, God, please. And the reality is my story was not a reconciliation ultimately. But the redemption of my story was that God rescued me from choices that were
Yes.
costing me a lot that were not mine to make. And
Mm.
so now I am living a redemption story. It's different, but different doesn't have to mean bad. It's just different.
Yes.
yeah. That's so good, Lise. I would just point us to like Romans 12, verse 18, where it's almost like, Paul's anticipating this very question. And I think sometimes what ends up happening, it goes back to that shame, guilt kind of conversation where you just feel like, man, I am on the hook and this thing has to be reconciled. It has to be restored. And if not, that is saying something about me, like that's saying something about my scenario or situation. And it's really fascinating that in Romans 12:18, Paul says, if possible, which he starts with a conditional clause. So right
Hmm.
away, we know, well, sometimes it might not be possible. And the next phrase it says,
Hmm.
so far as it depends on you. So this is the condition. And also, this is honestly, when I teach this, it's like you first read that and you get really annoyed. Like, really, it has to depend on me? Why am I always the one who's got to like do the therapy and theology? Why am I always the one who's got to prioritize my emotional, spiritual, physical health? Why am I always the one? Why is it always on me? And to that, I'd say, well, just imagine if the Apostle Paul was like, you know what, you're right. There's a little typo here, and he edits it and he changes it to if possible, so far as it depends on them. Well, now how do you feel?
Oh,
Right.
goodness.
We feel out of control. We feel like, well, now
Hmm.
that's actually a burden that we can't even bear. And so what Paul does for us, he actually gives us this idea of agency that he's saying, actually, if possible, and sometimes it's not possible, but if possible, and you've done all that you can do, right? And then the end of this is we're on the imperative, the hook. What are we on the hook for? To live peaceably with all. So peace is still the requirement. Peace is still the thing that we ought to pursue. So sometimes, Stacy, like if possible, you do all the things, and it is the redemption story. It is the story that, and you're like, praise God, there's peace and there's shalom, and it's a well-ordered world. Like that's amazing. But sometimes, if possible, and like you do all the things, and there is no peace. There's still hidden devices. There's still work trips where your Life 360 randomly turns off. It's like, wait a minute, what is going on? But the problem, the challenge is we're still on the hook for peace. So what do you do? Well, sometimes peace is possible with both of your presence. But sometimes the only way that you can ensure peace is by removing your presence from that scenario. So you can have personal peace while the other person is determined to live out the chaos of their own decisions and the consequences that go with it. And so, I would just point to a passage like Romans 12:18 that says, yeah, we are to pursue it if possible. And then, and if it is not possible, you're still on the hook for personal peace. And sometimes that will be in relationship, but other times it means that it might be the end of a relationship.
And Stacey,
Hmm.
I think it's important to remember because this is another scripture that really seems to confuse people and keep them potentially locked into a destructive relationship. And it's the fact that Jesus modeled for us and taught us to lay down our life for others. But I think we have to remember Jesus laid down his life to accomplish a high and holy purpose. He did not lay down his life to enable bad behavior to continue.
Hmm.
So good. So good. And there's so much dignity in this. just using the word agency, that you have a role to play. Like, you're an adult, you're being treated as a responsible image bearer of God with the dignity that that entails. And so you have a role to play, and you're meant to rise to it. It's just really good. Um, I have so many questions, but I know we don't have that time. So I'm going to circle around to something that you've talked about, Lysa, before. And it's a conversation you were having with your daughter about, I just want things to be normal again. And I that comes out of a lot of our mouths at different times. Can you expand a little bit about what she offered to you in that moment?
Yeah, one of my highest desires in life is peace. Like, I just want
Hmm.
everybody to get along. I want things to be happy. I want there to be a spirit of gratitude and kindness. And, so I was just lamenting to my daughter. I feel like I'm living a life that I never wanted, I didn't see coming. And how is this my life? Like, can we not just get back to normal? But you see, my desire to get back to normal, what was normal was quite dysfunctional. And so
Mm.
I didn't really
Hmm.
want to get back to normal. What I really wanted was peace. And so my daughter looked at me and said, "Well, mom, you might just have to redefine what peace looks like in this season." And it stopped me dead in my tracks. And I thought, she's exactly right. Again, God does promise us that with Him, redemption is possible. But that
Yes.
redemption story it may not look like what we think a good God should do. You see, part of my issue is I kept running ahead, and I know God is good. So I kept running ahead into my future, thinking up the good that a good God should do in this story. And then I wanted to hold God
Yes.
accountable to the good that I assumed a good God should do. And that's where my frustration, that's where my disillusionment came from. And so when Hope said to me, my daughter Hope, when she said to me, "You might have to redefine what peace or what normal looks like for you in this season," I think what she was really saying is, "Mom, you might have to be open to the fact that God is still good and He will bring about good, but it may look very different than what you anticipated."
Yes. Yes. I love that. It's we have to lay down our preference sometimes of what we think needs to be the best so that he can bring the best. I love that you say he is the God of redemption and he has brought it. And I rejoice with you over that. So as we wind down for the two of you, is there anything in this last little that, oh, I would really love to say this to the woman that's listening right now and is in a difficult marriage?
Joel, I'll let you jump in here.
Um, I would just say that what feels like maybe the end is really not an end in the economy of God's kingdom. And, the most, in my opinion, the most important preposition in the Bible is the preposition through. And we live in a world that does not want to go through anything. We want to go around. We want to go under. We
Mm.
we, we want to escape the best that we can. And yet, all the way throughout the Bible, that we see the preposition through. Israel has to go through the Red Sea. They've got to go through the wilderness. Jesus has to go through Samaria. Jesus has to go through the cross. And each of those things has a
Wow.
purpose. Experience the power of God.
Yes.
Experience the presence of God. Experience the person of Jesus. And even in this thing, even in this tragedy that you're walking through, that you did not ask for, you didn't wake up and say, "Today is the day for this heartache." Um, as you process through it, you will meet the power and the presence and the person of Jesus. And just be encouraged and equipped. And I pray that this book would be that resource for you, where you encounter all three of those things in tangible, practical ways.
Yeah. And I would say, sometimes we think in order to move forward in our redemption story that we have to have the answers of why this happened and how is God
Mm.
going to use it and when am I going to
Hmm.
feel better, and I think sometimes we grasp at that epic conversation that we've played mentally in our head over and over and over,
Mhm.
where the other person finally owns what they did, they say they're sorry, they fall on their knees and beg for your forgiveness and say, "I should never have done this to you." And chances are most of us really aren't going to have that epic conversation. If someone else is unwilling to own what they did and they have a narrative in their mind that justifies their behavior, then
Mhm.
they're not going to
Mhm.
ask for your forgiveness. They're not going to give you that kind of closure that maybe your heart is so desperate for. And you probably will never get the
Mhm.
answers to why this happened.
Yeah.
My counselor,
Mm.
Jim, says, Lysa, don't try to make sense of something that makes no sense or you'll lose all sense. And
Mm.
I think that that's so true. So it's not the answers that will give us the comfort that we need. It it really is what Joel just described. It is pressing through this and letting it draw you closer to God rather than drawing you away from God. And that is the ultimate choice. That is the determining
Yes.
factor of redemption or not. My
Yeah.
redemption
Yes.
in this is not that I'm now married to an amazing man. I am now married to an amazing man, and that is a beautiful aspect of my story, and I'm grateful for it every single day, but that's not the redemption. The redemption is that I made it on the other side of this with my arms still raised high, praising the goodness of our God, and
Yes.
that I'm
Mm.
still alive, and that God is somehow taking truly what the enemy meant for evil and using it for good. That is redemption, and that is possible for everyone. I don't
Yeah.
know what your future will look like. I don't know if there's gonna be a future relationship or if there's gonna be financial restoration or if I don't know. I don't know how all of this will play out for each and every person, but God does. And our God is good. He is good to us, and He is good at being God. So you can have restoration with God right now in this moment, and you can have that beautiful redemption story because of him.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I have nothing to add to that. That's beautiful. I just encourage you to go rewind that and listen to them both again. A key word that you both have said was through and with God, with Jesus. He's with you in it.
Yeah.
You guys, thank you. Thank you so much. I know that everyone wants this now, so I'm going to put the in the bio the notes at the bottom. I'll put the link to the book. I'll also put the link to the therapy and theology podcast, which I just put it in your top 5, guys. And then also ways that you can connect with Lysa at her webpage or socials. This was rich, and bless you. God bless the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and bless you too. Your work is so, so important, and we just pray many blessings on your continued ministry as well.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my joy to have you today. Thank you so much. Dear ones, there's going to be parts of this podcast that you're going to want to rewind, as I mentioned before, and just listen to again because the truth bombs in there are really rich. And this podcast is for all of us the truth of who God is, the healing journey that we're all on in various ways, and then also how we can be with those that are walking this road. So, a blessing to you. I bless you. I bless you today that your hearts would be opened, that they would be flooded with light, that as Ephesians 1 prays, that you would know this God who loves you so much in a deeper way, even today. Thanks for being with me. I already look forward to being with you again. So, till next time, bye for now.